You sit down to do something simple. Reply to one message. Open one document. Make one decision. But your body feels strangely heavy. You stare at the task for minutes, sometimes hours. Not because you don't care, but because something inside you quietly freezes. And eventually, you start calling yourself lazy. Visual, dim room with a laptop glowing softly. But what if laziness is not the real problem? What if your brain is cornered emotionally, and slowing down is its way of protecting you? Most people imagine laziness as not wanting to try, but this experience feels different. You want to move. You think about moving constantly. Yet somehow, your mind keeps circling instead of acting. You make plans at night, then avoid them the next morning. You open apps without meaning to, scroll without enjoying it, delay tiny responsibilities until they start feeling emotionally dangerous. And over time, this changes how you see yourself. You stop trusting your own intentions. Visual, person sitting on edge of bed staring at phone. You begin saying things like, I have no discipline. I ruin everything. Other people can function normally. Why can't I? But underneath this pattern, there's usually something more complicated happening. Because the brain does not freeze randomly. It freezes when action becomes emotionally associated with pain. That pain can come from many places. Fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of disappointing people, or even fear of discovering that your effort still won't be enough. And when those emotions build quietly for years, the nervous system starts treating ordinary tasks like emotional threats. Not physical threats, emotional ones. Visual, abstract hallway slowly narrowing. This is why answering one email can suddenly feel exhausting. The task itself is small, but your brain attaches invisible emotional weight to it. What if I say the wrong thing? What if I disappoint them? What if I fail again? So the mind delays. Not because it is overloaded. Psychology sometimes calls this avoidance coping. The brain avoids short-term discomfort, even when that avoidance creates bigger stress later. And the strange part is that avoidance temporarily works. The moment you delay the task, your nervous system feels relief. A small drop in pressure. And because the brain loves relief, it learns the pattern. Avoidance becomes emotionally rewarding. Visual, waves pulling gently away from shore. Over time, this creates a dangerous misunderstanding. You think you are avoiding work, but often you are avoiding the emotional state connected to the work. That changes everything, because now the problem is no longer productivity. It is emotional association. Your brain has linked action with threat, and once that link becomes strong enough, even motivation stops helping. This is why advice like just push yourself often fails. Because the nervous system does not respond well to force when it already feels cornered. Imagine a small animal trapped in a room. If you scream at it to move, it freezes harder. The human nervous system can behave the same way. Visual, small bird trapped inside a quiet room. Especially when shame becomes involved. Shame changes behavior differently than sadness or stress. Neuroscience shows that shame activates threat-related brain systems connected to social survival. Your brain starts focusing less on growth and more on self-protection. That is why emotionally cornered people often look calm from the outside. But internally, their mind is filled with pressure. Pressure to perform. Pressure to prove themselves. Pressure to finally become good enough. And eventually, the brain slows down to conserve energy. Not because you're incapable, because your system feels unsafe. The first step is not forcing productivity. It is reducing emotional threat. Visual, empty room with sunlight moving slowly. One practical way to do this is by shrinking the emotional meaning of tasks. Instead of telling yourself, I need to fix my whole life today, reduce the task psychologically. Open a document. Write one sentence. Reply with one line. Why does this work? Because the brain reacts more calmly to manageable uncertainty. Behavioral psychology calls this lowering activation energy. Small actions bypass the nervous system's threat alarm. And once movement begins, momentum often follows naturally. The second step is separating effort from identity. Many people unconsciously believe, if I fail this task, it means something about who I am. That belief creates paralysis, because every action now feels emotionally loaded. Visual, notebook with one sentence written. This task is not your identity. Instead, practice viewing tasks as behaviors, not self-worth measurements. For example, if you miss one deadline, avoid saying, I'm useless. Say, my nervous system avoided something stressful. That tiny language shift matters, because the brain listens to repetition, and repeated self-attacks strengthen shame pathways over time. The third step is rebuilding trust with yourself slowly, not through intensity, through consistency. Most emotionally exhausted people keep trying to change their life in one dramatic burst. But the nervous system trusts patterns more than promises. Visual, slow footsteps appearing in sand. So choose one small action you can repeat daily without overwhelming yourself. A 5-minute walk, cleaning one corner of your room, opening your work without demanding perfection. Why? Because repeated safe experiences slowly teach the brain. Action is survivable. That is how emotional paralysis begins dissolving. Quietly, not all at once. The fourth step is understanding hidden emotional debt. Sometimes exhaustion is not physical tiredness. It is accumulated emotional pressure, unspoken stress, constant comparison, internal criticism. Your brain cannot endlessly carry emotional weight without slowing down somewhere. And for many people, that slowdown gets labeled as laziness. Visual, figure carrying invisible heavy box. But emotionally cornered people are often not lazy at all. They are mentally overprotective. Their nervous system is trying to avoid more pain, even if the strategy no longer helps. So maybe the goal is not becoming a perfectly disciplined person. Maybe the goal is creating enough inner safety that action no longer feels threatening. Think of your mind like a doorway. Right now, every task may feel like pushing against a locked door. More force only creates more resistance. But emotional safety slowly unlocks the hinge. And suddenly, movement requires less effort. Visual, door opening slightly with soft light behind it. Not because you became a different person, because your nervous system stopped preparing for emotional danger everywhere. And maybe that changes the question completely. Instead of asking, why am I so lazy? You begin asking, what is my brain trying to protect me from? That question feels softer, but also more honest. Visual, person walking slowly beside calm ocean waves. Because sometimes the person you call lazy is actually someone who has been emotionally cornered for a very long time. And maybe what they needed was never more shame. Maybe they needed safety first.